Chad Erik Roberts was shot to death by two police officers in Kennesaw, Georgia. Mr. Roberts is the first victim of police killings for the year 2017. Details of this incident were provided by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Shortly after the incident, the GBI published a press release which established, among other things, that 3 police agencies chased Mr. Roberts. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution regurgitated this report as follows. First, notice the title chosen for this incident. Cherokee police chase ends with driver fatally shot, officer wounded. By inserting officer wounded, the reader is swayed to believe that this was a case of violence against police officers, and it prepares the reader to believe that killing Mr. Roberts was justified. Now look at the picture. Does this site give the impression that police worked so hard during the holiday that they had to block a major road to protect the public from a dangerous person? Next, look at the media's story highlights. A man struck a police officer as he sped away from a traffic stop in Canton. How was the officer struck was revealed in an AJC follow-up interview of Mr. Roberts' fiancée as follows. After briefly speaking to an officer, Roberts decided to flee and he ran over the officer's foot in the process. Next highlight. Police chased the car into Kennesaw where the tires were deflated. That implies that police attempted to disable a runaway suspect peacefully. Then, Chad Erik Roberts, 35 of Canton, got out with a gun and was fatally shot by officers. This statement is perhaps the most important of all. If it's true that Mr. Roberts had a gun, where is that evidence? Take a look at this picture again. Are we expected to believe that out of 3 police agencies that chased Mr. Roberts, there is no video or picture to corroborate the police's story? Are we supposed to take it on blind faith that the police are telling the truth? Or should the public suspect any future claim of a gun to be a plant? It certainly wouldn't be the first time. If it's true that Mr. Roberts came out with a gun, then a case might be made that the police shot Mr. Roberts in self-defense. But then again, maybe not. I'll explain later. Now let's review the GBI's press release, which appears to have been the primary source used by the AJC to report. On New Year's Eve at approximately 10:09 p.m., Mr. Roberts was parked outside of a closed business. Not illegally parked, but suspiciously parked. The AJC only reported that police found him in a parking lot and that he struck an officer as he sped off. And by the way, the AJC reported the killing took place at about 2 a.m. Why was there no mention in this report of a time of death or a 4-hour chase? 3 agencies chased Mr. Roberts' car. A tire deflation device was used to stop the car. The driver exited the car and presented a gun during contact with police. Does that mean Mr. Roberts pointed a gun at the police? 2 officers shot and killed Mr. Roberts. And that an autopsy report will be conducted. Notice in every case where a police kills a victim, it is the victim that gets tested to check for substance abuse to justify the cop. How often do the killer police ever get tested? Then the report concludes by acknowledging an injured police and states that no other officers were injured. No mention of any other civilians being harmed. Here are some questions not answered in this report. What was Mr. Roberts suspected of? What did the officers say to him that caused him to flee from that parking lot? Why was it not mentioned that the chase took 4 hours? And what evidence is there that he really had a gun? Finally, let's review the AJC's interview of Mr. Roberts' fiancée, Miss Victoria Talent. Check out the story highlights. Chad Erik Roberts, 35 of Canton, exited his car with a gun and was fatally shot by officers. Then, his fiancée says Roberts should have been stunned instead of shot. The first highlight wrongly establishes that Mr. Roberts was shot by cops in self-defense. Then the second highlight makes the fiancé look ridiculous for suggesting that a man with a firearm should be disabled by a stun gun. Anything this fiancé has to say has already been monumentally discredited even before this article begins. Perhaps the most important question for Ms. Talent would be to ask about Mr. Roberts' alleged gun. Instead, the article simply states, among Talent's many questions is whether officers saw Roberts with a gun. Now here's my assessment. Cop killings happen too often, typically without accountability and with public approval. But if you or I had approached a man in a parked car and we carried a gun and made demands to that man, we would be guilty of kidnap, coercion, armed robbery, and more. But with the magic of a badge, these acts, and far worse, are considered acceptable and even desirable. Let's not forget how dangerous to the public a 4-hour car chase can be. Had there been any casualties to the public, would that price have been worth catching a man who was merely suspicious? And was it immoral for Mr. Roberts to defend himself by fleeing known tyrants whose sole purpose it is to obey the commands of their bosses? My condolences to Miss Talent and to Mr. Roberts' family. It appears that the real reason Mr. Roberts was killed was because he had the audacity to sit in his parked car. If you know more about this police killing, please provide details in the comments. Useless, baseless, or irrelevant rants against the victim or his family will be deleted. What other media biases, discrepancies, or tactics did you notice about how this incident was reported to the public? Please let me know your thoughts, criticisms, and questions to help me improve future videos. Thank you very much for listening. This is Tiger Lily talking about just a few bad apples.